Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast brought to you by BetMGM. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined by our illustrious group, Stuckey, Colin Wilson, and Brett McMurphy. And we are talking about the college football playoff. It has been 9 glorious seasons of a 14 playoff, one more before it rides off into the sunset and expands to 12 teams. And we're here to wax poetic on player movement, scheme changes, how college football has really gone through a revolution in terms of offenses since the 2014 season and how that impacts how we bet it. We're also going to turn to Brett McMurphy, who I will pitch it to now because he has a little bit of news about this 12-team playoff that's right on the horizon.
Yeah, well, they finally officially determined, obviously, it would be a 12-team playoff, but I think more importantly, the first-round games will be on campus sites. The quarterfinals will be rotated within the bowls, the semifinals in the bowls, and then the championship game. Real quickly, the things that stuck out for me, I don't know what you guys feel. I really believe once we're like a minute into that first playoff game in 2024 and we see it on campus, the common cry on Twitter will be, why isn't every playoff game on campus? There's a lot of issues with that, logistics. You only have a week lead time to schedule these games when it's a week-by-week playoff. I think those are excuses. And obviously the bowls carry a lot of influence with that. The other thing, which, you guys will have a better read on this, probably you the most stuck, is there's going to be some playoff games that are going to be going head-to-head against NFL games. And I don't think that's great for college football. I don't like that. But, unless you want to play Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m., you kind of got to go head-to-head with the NFL when this 12-team playoff gets going in 2024.
Don't mind it. More the better. Most people have multiple TVs now. Plus, the NFL eventually is going to be on every day of the week. I mean, I just saw the schedule today. They're playing on Black Friday now. Like, there's a Black Friday afternoon game. So, like, it's inevitability. I don't care. I'll have Aaron Rodgers taking on Tua on a side TV in my college football on Black Friday. That's fine. I'm fine with it. Yeah, that's an inevitability. More meaningful college football. I'm happier. But go ahead, Brett.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Stuck. Week 18 in the NFL, we're going to decide like the last 2 seeds in each conference. Like, there's really not that much drama. I mean, the buys are pretty much wrapped up by then. It seems like the seeding's pretty much wrapped up usually. I mean, is college football going to cut into something important from the NFL at this time of year? Later in the month, sure, with the playoffs, but I'm not sure if they're going to overlap there. But, I mean, there is a spot for college football, I think, to carve out when it comes to Week 18 in the NFL.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's more the merrier. I'm fine with it all. NFL is going to bleed into everything over time. I think there's room for both. I'm happy. Now, the age-old argument is there's going to be the people that the old guard will say it makes the regular season less meaningful. I think it makes the regular season more meaningful. Like, there's more meaningful games overall, including conference championships. And now I get it. Like, Alabama, there's not as many meaningful games. Like, they're probably still going to make it, right? Like, before, but like Alabama was most of the time they're getting in the college football playoff anyway. It's kind of like, does the NFL playoff suck because Mahomes and the Chiefs, if Mahomes stays healthy, that they're going to get into the playoff? Like, yeah, there's going to be a couple teams that going into the year are going to get into the playoff. But overall, I think there's more meaningful games in totality. And then, we don't have that long break. I love it. I'm all for this 12-teamer. I would have been with 8, but 12 is fine with me too.
There's going to be a team that has one loss, get into the playoff, not host one of the opening round games. I'm talking Alabama. Like, think of Ohio State this past year. Didn't win their conference. One loss, got into the playoff, gets into a scenario going into somebody's house, steamrolls a group of 5 game, right? And then gets all the way and wins the championship, which we've had at-larges win championships with Alabama before. I mean, that's going to happen. And you get that extra rest because you didn't have to play in the conference championship game. Wouldn't you rather trade a conference championship game for going on the road against like Central Florida? Let me think of a power. They're no longer power.
Yeah, your verbiage right now is one of the things that's going to go off. Like, we're talking about the 10-year anniversary of the college football playoff. Power 5 is one of the things that came of this because, like, they were guaranteed bowl games and the group of 5 had to share one. Now it's like the whole landscape's going to shift because it's going to end up being Power 2, right? In a way, Power 2, and then group of 10, 8, like then
well,
so.
Yeah, Mike Oresco, the American Athletic Commissioner, Tuesday, wrote a nearly 2,600 word open letter. I mean, by the time I finished reading this, 3 more teams left this conference. But basically, he was saying that there should no longer be the Power Five and the Group of Five and yada, yada, yada. I will not get into it. So I said, okay, you're right. From now on, I'll refer to the conferences as Power Two, Middle Three, and the Group of Five. But you're right. It's going to be different. The top rated the top highest ranked conference champions, 6 of them automatically get in the playoff, and then 6 at large bids. What Colin hit on is you're basically describing Notre Dame. Notre Dame will never have to play a conference championship game. Notre Dame will never get a first round bye. Everyone's like, oh my God, that's going to force Notre Dame to join a conference. They may join a conference, but not because of this. Because now they don't have to play a 13th regular season game. They don't have to play a conference championship. They still control their schedule. If they're good enough to be in the top 12 in the country, then they're probably going to host a first round game and bring, several millions of dollars to the South Bend community for what in essence is an 8th or 9th home game that season. So, that plays out perfectly for Notre Dame. The rest of those guys, we'll have to find out how that works. But and Stuck, to your point, absolutely, this is going to bring more interest into the regular season because now with a 6th conference champ being guaranteed a spot, the Power Five, we assume, will get those 5 automatic bids. So now you've got multiple conferences and multiple teams within the smaller conferences battling out to be that highest ranked team. Obviously, you mentioned Alabama getting in every year. Well, they win the SEC more times than not. But now you could have 2-3 teams from the SEC, 2-3 teams from the Big Ten get in. So those late games are going to matter. You're going to have to win those late games to finish 10-2, maybe possibly 9-3 to get in a large bid. So I agree. More football is better. I was just more concerned about the ratings impact it could have when they go head to head against the NFL.
I mean, it could slip a little bit. And Brett, go ahead, Colin, I'll let you go first.
I was just gonna say, what a scene it's going to be when Tulane or Troy is hosting Michigan or Bama, or God forbid Georgia doesn't win like their conference championship, like Georgia going into Troy, like what a gambling opportunity too. No one is going to take the Group of Five home team against a Michigan or a Georgia, or hell, Tennessee would have gotten in, I think, maybe last year. Who knows? But, what a betting opportunity. For me, that's great TV. But I wonder if the ratings will sag when you get these Group of Five teams to play and host.
All right, yeah. And are we totally positive that you say the middle 3, but like look at the pack, whatever it is called, as I guess they always keep their name. But like, are we sure that their conference champ is going to be rated higher than the other group of what we know now as the Group of Five? So you might have a couple Group of Five, and the Pac-12 champ is not, maybe has to get an at-large. I love it. I think it just creates more drama. And then like the conference championship weekend now, for the most part, it's like there's a lot of irrelevancy on that weekend. Now there's no irrelevancy. All those games matter. And then it's going to be an electric atmosphere. But there's just a less of a break between meaningful college football games, right? Instead of like waiting a month and I'm like, wait, who's on these teams again? That's what I love about it too. And people are going to complain no matter what, but everyone will adjust. There's going to be lines and there's college football games. If you're listening to this podcast, that's all you care about. That's all I care about. So people are going to complain. I love it personally. And if you don't love it, you'll get over it because you'll be on your couch with money on one of these sides and hopefully getting to the window, because that's all that matters.
A question for Brett though is like, are we cutting down our bowl slate? Like, are we trimming down to like 39? Are we going to cut some of these December 21st-ish bowls because we have a first round of the playoffs going on at the same time?
Yeah. So again, this doesn't start till 2024. So basically from the bowl people I talked to, they believe that in the bowl contracts, actually, they coincide with the college football playoff original 12-year deal, which we are, as Mike alluded to earlier, we are we are now going into year 10. So we have 3 years left, 23 regular season, 24, and then 25. I think we'll stay at 41 bowls through 2025. And then in 2026 and beyond, then I think you'll see some bowls get trimmed away because of the popularity of the 12-team playoff for all the reasons we said. I would be surprised if you would see any bowls go away in the next before that time, because again, they've got contracts signed. They've got conferences that are committed to their bowl games. That's obviously there's going to be some tweaks in that because the Big 12 membership is increasing, Conference USA is decreasing, the Big 10 and SEC is musical chairs. So we will see some bowls cut back. I don't think it'll be until 2026. And then Stuck, one thing, which Mike knows this, is the Group 5 expert. 2 or 3 years ago, if we would have had the top highest 6-rated conference champs make the playoff, the Pac-12, Oregon, number 25, would not have made it. You would have had Cincinnati out of the American, and you would have Coastal Carolina out of the Sun Belt would have made the playoffs in a 12-team playoff that year. The Pac-12 would not have made the playoff.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, and best of both worlds now. You get 12-team playoff and the same amount of bowls until further notice, if that's the case. We'll get like a 2-win UMass in a bowl game. Like, come on, I love it. You got to love it. Brett, is there – I've read on like maybe just clips or rumors, any merit to potential expansion to 16 like in the horizon? Is it, let's see how this goes first, and then is that a possibility, or is this, you think it's going to be for the foreseeable future with 12?
Yeah, Stuck, it's a possibility, but look, they're just trying to get this 12-teamer off the ground, and again, it's starting in 2024. However, that's only for 2 years. They've agreed to go 12 beyond that. So 2026, that's when they will have a new contract unless they revert back to 2024 as far as, are they all going to be on ESPN? Is it going to be ESPN and Fox? So there's a lot of things involved in that. So, yeah, could we get to 16? Absolutely, but I don't think it will be for another probably 5 to 10 years, being optimistic. Yeah. I think they'll go with 12, see how that goes. And then, if there's an outcry or just, look, 16 works better. And like you mentioned, who knows what's going to happen with conference realignment. I said, it's the Power 2, the Middle 3, the Group 5. In 2 or 3 years, it may be the Power 2, the Middle 2, the Group of 6. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with conference realignment in the next 2 or 3 years.
You could see other teams drop down too, like divisions. But I personally, like I said, I wouldn't really care. But 12 feels like the max. Like 16, you're talking now over 10% of the teams, like 12% of the teams are making it. But it is what it is. I'm excited. Mike, where do you want to take this rodeo next?
Just a few things to react to. First, I know the NFL is the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to TV ratings, and they just dominate a day of the week. But historically, they don't come up against other sports all that often. So a lot of this is like hypothetical. It's like, yeah, every once in a while they're up against the Hawaii Bowl and they crush that in terms of the ratings. But I would be interested to see how they do against a college football playoff game in a Week 18 Jets versus Browns game that doesn't matter. Like, let's actually find out. So I do think there's been increased confidence from college football power brokers that like it's possible to get it done. And this question, I'll just throw to Brett before we wrap on this section of it. In terms of the flexibility of potentially moving everything into week 0, because they've already kind of showed the logistics of how that can work. And I know some of the conference commissioners and ADs have paid lip service to, well, the kids have summer school class. It's like, oh, all of a sudden you care about academics. I think realistically you could move everything to week 0 and then maybe mitigate some of these NFL college football playoff head-to-head issues down the line. And then the last part of it too, I saw some commentary in the past few weeks that potentially you could have a conference championship week where everyone in the conference plays. I believe we did this during the COVID year where you had the conference championship game and then everyone else who didn't play each other matching up, like in the Big 10, the SEC. That way there's not as much of that. To me, it feels a little bit icky where it's like, oh, we didn't even want to play in the conference title game. We'd prefer to get rest and then play in the college football playoff. This way, everyone's playing that game either way. Have you heard any rumors on that front?
Yeah, look, anything that you've heard, read, or thought of is obviously being thought about. In the week 0, that you mentioned, that was brought up. They've decided to table that or delay that because, again, while that makes a lot of sense, one of the few remaining things that hasn't changed with college football is that the traditional Thanksgiving games, the traditional rivalries around that time of year. So if you go week 0, now those games get moved up a week potentially. You're no longer playing those SEC games around Thanksgiving on Black Friday and different things. So they're looking at this a million different ways, and that is a possibility. All we know right now is for the next 3 years, we're pretty much we'll be set for the 12-teamer. But when Fox, or excuse me, when ESPN and/or Fox finalize whatever the future of the 12-team playoff is, like you mentioned, Mike, that could impact where we will now be required to have a week 0, where we will be required for all teams within a conference to play the week of the conference title games. I don't really think, I know that happened in COVID, I believe, but I don't really think that's going to happen because, again, these conferences want the most bang for their buck for these conference championship games. That's why they're being played for money, not determine who's the best in their league, despite what they want to tell you. So why would you dilute your product with, 5 games that day? I guess you could say they could be lead-ins to your game. But again, there's only so many TV windows. I, again, never say never, but I'm doubtful that would ever work out because, again, you would have to schedule those games on the fly. And we did it for COVID. BYU and Coastal did it that one year with 4 days notice. But, for a regular season, I don't think that would happen.
Hey, if
you mentioned not having incentive, by the way, Mike, but incentive, like, even if you're like, hey, rest, but that's why I think 12 works in that the top 4 are going to get buys. So like we want to win that game, get a buy. And then if you're not, maybe necessarily guaranteed one of the top 4 slots and you're playing, you want to host the game. So I think that there's still proper incentive for that conference championship weekend. But go ahead, what were you going to say?
I just wanted to kick it to Brett before we get into the X's and O's maturation and kind of evolution in college football since the end of the 2013 season. I believe you have a trivia question to get us fired up, get the competitive juices flowing here, Brett.
Yeah, this is short, sweet, and hopefully you guys will know this. And Stuckey doesn't read what I report, so he doesn't know the answer from my story. But on Wednesday, I reported that the Big Ten is looking to get rid of the requirement to play Power 5 non-conference teams, at least one a year. It's been in place since 2016. So they pretty much had to do that, although there have been some exceptions. I mentioned that because they will still be continued to play FCS opponents annually every year. My question is, finally get to it, going into 2023, there are only 3 FBS programs that have never played an FCS opponent. Going into 2023. Mike, you get one guess first, then we'll go to Colin and then Stuckey.
Can you repeat it one more time? Three Big Ten teams?
No. 3 FBS teams.
Okay.
There's 133 in FBS right now.
I got 2 on top.
3 of those teams have never in the history of their program ever played an FCS team.
I'm going to go ahead with
are those 3 teams?
Ohio State's my first guess.
That is incorrect, and they actually play in FCS this year.
Youngstown State, Trestle Bowl.
I'm going to go Northwestern, mostly because Pat Fitzgerald let us know at Big Ten Media Days last year. We play a full FBS schedule here.
0 for 2. Stuck.
Yeah, Northwestern lost to an FCS school recently, right? So never played an FCS school, right?
Yeah,
that's the question.
It is not necessarily a Big Ten school, by the way.
Yeah.
I got another good one.
Yeah, Northwestern lost. Who did Northwestern lose to? Or was that? Didn't they lose to an FCS school? It's got to be the proud traditional programs. I'm thinking. So I'm gonna go USC.
That is correct. The other two schools I'm looking for are playing FCS opponents this year for the first time ever. So in 2024, USC will be the only team in the nation that has never played an FCS opponent. Mike, you got another guess?
I got one.
Let's see here. I'll stick with Stuckey's theory on this. The proud traditional schools. I'll go Oklahoma.
No, they played Petrino's Southwest Missouri a year or so.
Yeah,
ago.
Northwestern lost to Southern Illinois last year. Just remember that. Sorry. All
right. I'm gonna go with Stanford, whose new head coach is going to play his old spot, Sacramento State.
That is incorrect.
Damn.
Or Stuck, you want another one?
Yeah, Stanford played Colgate. Stanford played Colgate in an opener. I think I lost money on it. We'll stick with traditions. Yeah, Notre Dame. I can't remember them ever playing an FCS school.
Correct. Notre Dame never played an FCS school. This year they are playing Tennessee State.
Oh, that's right.
Historical black college. First FCS opponent for Notre Dame. We got one left.
I have no idea on the other one.
All right, you guys get one guess, and then I'll try the answer.
All right, let me throw out. I'm looking at my my helmet board here, off in the distance. Let's go. Trying to go a little bit off the beaten path here. I'll go Marshall. Oh, sorry, not Marshall. Maryland.
No, not Maryland. Colin?
I wouldn't even know where to start. So I'll start with how about Wisconsin?
Nope. Stuck. Last guess.
Nobody's picking an SEC school because there's an entire weekend.
Exactly.
Yeah. Maryland played Old Dominion, I believe, before they were FBS.
SEC schools can't even go a year without playing.
Yeah, SEC schools I'm not thinking of. So I was thinking of like proud programs that aren't in the FCC. That's why I said USC, Notre Dame. I really have no idea. I'm gonna go, and a lot of the Pac-12 play those like. I'm gonna go Michigan. Stick with my theme.
App State, baby.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. They lost to one. Yeah, I have no idea who the third is. It's well. Can you give us? Could we go around one more time and give a conference hint?
You have 3 seconds to guess. It's a Pac-12 school. Mike, guess.
It is a Pac-12. Damn.
I'll go Wazoo.
Nope. Colin?
UCLA.
They always play EWU.
Correct.
UCLA. Nice.
UCLA is playing North Carolina Central, another HBCU. Yeah, surprisingly, I knew Notre Dame. I knew USC. I wasn't aware of UCLA, but
I wouldn't have guessed UCLA in a million years.
I just mentioned that with my Big Ten story. So, yeah, in 2024, USC will be the only school that has never played an FCS opponent.
That's pretty good trivia.
Hold on. Because my memory, I remember getting in a pissing match on Twitter with UCLA fans. They played Alabama State last year because the game got swapped in at the last minute because I think Michigan canceled on them. I believe that's right. So UCLA went Bowling Green, Alabama State, South Alabama for their non.
Oh yeah, that's right. No, UCLA did play an FCS last year.
So I've redeemed myself for going 0 for there.
Jesus, that's what I get.
Right, you got to go up. You got to go update your fucking story.
Yeah. Well, by the time you guys hear this podcast, my story will be updated.
And I swept, so that means I swept. So there's only 2. Well, wait, actually, should I go back? We should go back and check now. Maybe there's none of these are right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe I got to start reading Brett's story and edit them. By the way, we mentioned our helmets. Mike's got a bunch of helmets behind him. Colin has a bunch of helmets behind him that he swaps out. I have one helmet behind me that I'm not swapping out until it's an Army-Navy helmet, courtesy of Brett. It will not be swapped out until Colin correctly picks a total in the Army-Navy game that does not include overtime.
My God, you're killing me.
Yeah, there's a caveat. So it is. I mean, look, it's a beautiful helmet. at it. But just if you're always wondering why you always see that helmet, and until Colin successfully bets the over in the Army-Navy game that does not require extra time, that helmet will be my one helmet that remains there. Anyway,
I would bet that Stuckey takes it down before the end of the year because he's going to see Army line up in the shotgun.
Oh, Army doesn't run the triple option anymore. God damn. I forgot about that, ruining this too. Unbelievable. We'll talk about that later, but go ahead. Mike, where are we going?
All right, so the confetti falls on Jameis Winston. FSU beats Auburn in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl. Jimbo's traditional, a little bit more pro-style offense against the Gus Bus and his hurry-up, fast tempo, jet sweeps, and everything that he had, Marshall running for that offense. So those were the two kind of yin and yang of college football at the time. So much has changed schematically since the end of the 2013 season. What to you stands out from a college football perspective from 2013 to today, and how much has changed in that 9+ years? I'll go to you first, Colin.
The adoption of the spread. Once Saban put his flag in the ground and said, I am done with ground and pound Trent Richardson, and we're going to spread it out and go as deep as we can with double tights. Thank you, Sark, for implementing double tights into the Alabama offense. Once that was in, it was just like an explosion in college football. It was just trying to be the most explosive team down the field, shades of South Florida 2013, 2014. I think that has led to these crazy scores. We just saw TCU Michigan 51-45 in a playoff game. LSU scored 63 with Joe Burrow. So, I think just the offensive explosion that we've seen is great for the game. I do like a good defense. Haven't seen one in a while, right? Georgia just won 65-7. That's a great defense, but still, I would like a good two defenses on the field, which I don't think we've seen in a playoff game in a while.
How about you, Stuck? What stands out?
Yeah, I'll say on kind of to piggyback off that, it's also Alabama in going faster, right? Not just the spread, but it's actually the speed as well. And, if going back to like the Alabama ground and pound, like those teams, you go to the other elite teams have caught up to Alabama. But back when Alabama was the class, right? We're talking the time frame we're talking in 10 years ago, when their teams were so much more dominant. Imagine if they also, spread it out and were playing faster, because more plays equals less variance, right? And like I have the more talented team, and Saban finally realized that all these other teams, which makes it more difficult, I think, to kind of cut off the cream of the crop at the top of college football. So yeah, just the speed and the spread and the modernization of the game. And going back to tie into the college football playoff expansion, I do think that it's much more difficult. And I think it's only going to get more difficult to beat these elite teams at the very top. But with college football expansion, I do like, it's still football. It's still one game. You still got to roll the ball out there. It's still an oblong ball. I do think it'll make the futures market much more intriguing. And it might be, because over the last 10 years, who's won it? It's the same teams that we're recycling. But I remember, and it's so hard to hit a college football future. It's like you're trying to time when to buy Alabama. But there's not much value. This uncertainty, I think, brings potential investing opportunities into a market, especially early on. And I remember the only college football national title future I ever hit. Sorry, Colin, to bring this up again. I sent him a TikTok the other day. It was like TCU's the 2014 TCU's like the greatest team ever to make the college football playoff. But I bought Ohio State 50-1 after they lost to Va Tech in week 2. And, that's a team that has the chops to, you could argue that TCU probably should have got in, but they had the chops and the pedigree to actually go in and win it all. And they did. But I think that, teams like that, take an early loss, maybe even 2 early on, and it's a power conference team, they can still find themselves back into the mix. Whereas before, and this goes back to meaningful games, right? You lose 2 games early, you're cooked, done. Sometimes 1, depending on who you lose to. Now, your season's still alive, and you can potentially, just depending on what the price is, and you could find maybe more intriguing long shot futures with the expanded college football playoff, which is something that I'm going to be most interested in talking about on this podcast, writing about, because really, when we've been talking futures over the past, since college football playoff expansion, very few and far. The opportunities to maybe find a long shot or someone that's just, third, 20, 30 to 1, like very few and far between. I think those opportunities will open up, which makes the conversation at least more interesting from a gambling perspective. Colin, do you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. I think you and I are back into what we did 10 years ago. Ohio State lost that game, I believe, to Virginia Tech, right? And immediately, got to take a future because 12-team playoff, that loss is going to signify you're probably not going to have to play an extra game of the conference championship game, and you're still going to slip in. Yeah, you're going to have to go on.
It could make them even more interesting. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think you and I are back on the whole boom, took a loss, time to hit a future because there's no way this team's missing the playoff. So,
yeah. Whereas before it was like, all right, we know these 3 teams and who's this other team? Okay, it's going to be these 2. And you know that halfway through the season. Now, a lot more uncertainty. And especially early on, like trying to figure this out, I think it will create opportunity in the markets. But yeah, I would agree with Colin. I think it's the speed, the spread, and the modernization of the game. And a lot of those things, a lot of the things we see in college, we're talking about NFL as the king, is what ends up you seeing on some of the principles and things that's what you end up seeing on Sunday.
To kind of piggyback on that, but looking at it on the other side of the ball, everything you mentioned, the spread, the up-tempo, and also RPOs, tagging these passing plays onto every running concept that you have. Joe Moorhead really kind of being the lightning rod for that at Penn State. And once he was able to modernize Penn State's offense so quickly and take them from kind of a plodding Big Ten team to a threat to win the national championship, all with that offensive scheme. What it's done on the other side of the ball is it's reshaped how teams put together their rosters. There's no room for these huge 250-pound linebackers. That species of defender is dead. And now there's this incredible premium placed on those hybrid defenders, the Derwin James, the Isaiah Simmons. If you can play in the box, on the edge, at the linebacker position, make plays in the secondary, then you're worth your weight in gold. And because of that, when you look at some of the best teams in the college football playoff era, most of them have a dynamic, and they usually come up with like a name for them, a star, a rover. They give them their own custom defensive player name because they're so impactful, because you can stay on the field and actually match up whether, they're moving personnel in and out, or if they're playing like what Georgia does this, in the last 2 years has been unfair because they can leap hours on the field, but he essentially could be a running back, a slot receiver, wide receiver, tight end. How do you on the chessboard kind of match that? So from an X's and O's perspective, that's what stands out to me. That's so much different in college football today as opposed to 2013. Brett, what's something that stood out to you from the X's and O's part of the game?
Well, basically kind of what you guys have all touched on, but specifically more. And I was in Arizona last week and met up with a lot of coaches and ADs and different folks. And it's the quarterback position. I mean, it's not earth-shattering, but if no quarterback, no chance. I mean, maybe, back in 2014 or 15 or whatever, you could have a solid run game, a solid defense. Stuckey talked about, Alabama finally going fast. Lane Kiffin had to convince Saban to do that. I mean, it wasn't that long ago Saban was trying to change the rules where the offense would have to give the defense a certain amount of time to line up. And when that didn't pass, as Saban has done so often, he says you either adapt or you die. So he adapted. He ran up tempo with Kiffin, and it hasn't been the same. So, but more specifically, and you see this with the transfer portal now, is if you guys look at this when you look at your win totals and projections on a team as far as getting the national title game, first thing you look at is quarterback. And if they don't have a quarterback, it's like, do I really want to take a chance on that? So I think that's been the biggest difference is the quarterback is worth so much more to a team kind of similar to the NFL than maybe, even 10, certainly you go further, 20 years ago, whatever. Certainly it's a huge disparity going that far back, but even as recently as, 9 years ago when the playoffs started.
The old
who was out? Get go.
The old Grayson McCall is worth 10 points to the spread, right? I mean, that's how important quarterbacks are.
Yeah, I mean, look at Alabama, the progression of their quarterbacks. I mean, when they were winning, like just handing it to Trent Richardson a million times, relying on their D, like the best quarterback to come into the draft was like A.J. McCarron. And now look, it's like a top 10, top 5 pick every year. But yeah, I think a team that really encapsulates what we're talking about is Syracuse. Like if you go back to when Dino Babers first arrived at Syracuse, one of their competitive advantages was going super fast, right? Like we're gonna have play as many plays as humanly possible, and defenses aren't ready for it. They don't see it a lot. They don't practice against it. Fast forward to the last couple of years, it's not really that big of a competitive advantage anymore. Everyone is doing it. So the credit to Syracuse last year, I mean, they went to more RPO and they weren't just about like, let's go as fast as possible. And they kind of had a little bit of a resurgent year. But that's one of the things, like having that competitive advantage for those things it's harder to find. That's why I'm so upset that Army is abandoning the triple option, because that was one of the few left that still had merit. Everyone's going faster. We're going to just play this crazy style, and we're only down to 2. But whatever, I'm not going to talk about that again until later.
A perfect example is specifically the playoff. Clemson with Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, and Clemson without either quarterback. Look at the difference in their success.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just to hop in real quick, because I have thoughts on player movement impacting quarterback play in general across all of FBS. So these are some stats that I found to be really interesting. ESPN started doing their QBR metric, which isn't perfect, but it's a nice barometer for overall quarterback play. They started in 2004. Here's a quick question for the group. How many of those quarterbacks scored 70 or higher on their QBR out of, I believe at the time, there was like 124 schools. So in 2004, how many? And 70 more or less is like a B+ or better quarterback. How many do you think out of 125-ish?
In 2004?
Yep.
In college football?
In college football.
I'm going to say 13.
Colin, what do you think?
I was going to say 12. So,
Brett?
100%.
I'll keep going lower. I'll say 9.
All right, you guys were circling it. 11 quarterbacks. Now,
part of the reason that, to give you credit, I went really low because you wouldn't be asking it if it wasn't really low. But yeah,
and basically it went up every single year for about 6 years. And 2004 to 2013, the average was 22.5 per year. Then the playoff era begins. They have some of those graduate transfer rules that come into effect. From 2014 to 2018, it jumps to 34. And now with the transfer portal heating up and everybody can leave and have instant eligibility, it's up to 36 from 2019 to 2022. So that's a big impact in terms of the overall quality of the sport, in my opinion, where you can have every single conference has 3 or 4 really good quarterbacks. And a lot of the power conferences, if you don't have an answer there, you may as well just fire your coach and start all over again. But the beauty of it is that you can plug and play. You can grab somebody out of the portal. You can take someone who historically 20 years ago would have sat behind a starter for 2 or 3 years. Now he can be your guy day one as a freshman or redshirt freshman. So I just thought that was really interesting from a player movement perspective.
Let me say,
I just looked up that year. Stephon LaFours was number 1. Colin, your boy Matt Jones, number 5.
Oh God, Matt Jones is a god. Last thing I'll end on about from a college football, how it's changed. And I'm going to say something that sounds sacrilegious, but it might be brilliant. And I think success rate is dead. And I can't. Colin Wilson would never say that 4 years ago, right? But when Arkansas hired Barry Odom, the big knock on him was when he was at Missouri, we'll rush 3 and drop 8 coverage. That's all we're going to do. And now you look around college football, and every defensive coordinator is giving up the middle of the field. They don't care about the middle of the field. They will drop 7, drop 8. You look at Georgia winning the national title because they only had to rush 4. The best defenses can get pressure with 3 or 4. And almost, I'd say 80% of the defensive coordinators do not give a shit about the 40 or the 50-yard line. They will give up the middle of the field to protect within the 40 and get their finishing drives and rather stop the score. And so now when you have offenses that move this fast, because Saban decided to do this, and now everybody goes flash fast, right? That makes these defenses only able to not even get a blitz in, get a play call in, or, change up, or we're going to crossers of the defensive interior. Now it's just rush 3 or 4, drop 7 or 8. And I think that kills success rate numbers. It's phony success rate numbers because you're just giving up the middle of the field. So I've said that a couple of years now with these spread offenses and the tempo. These defensive coordinators just care about stopping the score. So
yeah, I wouldn't say it's dead, but I don't necessarily fully disagree with you. I think that it's definitely now in its importance has diminished, and the importance of, preventing explosive plays, creating havoc. Those are where defensive coordinators and teams are putting more of their focus. Mm-hmm. So, but I think that and I was actually thinking about this as one of the things I want to look at off season, is there's definitely like a hybrid success rate of when it matters, depending on where you are on the field. It's mixing in like finishing drives and havoc. So there's definitely some opportunity there from a analytics metric standpoint that we'll probably touch on as we get closer to the season, but we don't want to get too much into the weeds right now. But I think it's a really, really good point, Colin.
There will be a research piece. I did one last year. Does finishing drives equate to against the spread victory? And the answer is absolutely yes. So we'll see if success rate matters.
One more point to hit on is, through the lens of 2014 to today in the 14 playoff era, a gambling trend that stands out to you, or one that you've either mined yourself, you've tailed, just have the warm fuzzies for because it's made you a lot of money. For me, it's shocking how few upsets there are at the very top of the polls. So from 2001 to 2012, 9 unranked teams beat the number 1 team in the country. Since then, it's happened one time, and that's when A&M upset Alabama. Now, a big part of that is the Saban and Kirby Smart effect and kind of how they've taken the roster building to a different level. But also, when you start to look at the top 5, there's also a huge difference in terms of the overall upset. So since the start of the 2019 season, 4 years worth of games, we've only seen 9 top 5 upsets by unranked teams. And thanks to our Action Labs, data treasure trove, we can go all the way back to 2005. There was twice as many of those upsets from 05 to 13, 38 of them in 9 years. So you really have seen kind of a stabilizing factor at the top of the polls. It still happens from time to time, but in terms of me building my card and taking those kind of wild money line shots, I've kind of really reeled it in just because you're not seeing them hit. And as I mentioned, there was 9 top 5 upsets in the last 4 years. Iowa was one of them. I don't think anybody was buying in on Iowa at that point in the season. Michigan State also was upset by Purdue scoring 2 in the same year. So really, it's just, to me at least, there's been kind of a dearth of these wild upsets that we really saw in the mid-aughts. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think it might only continue to get even more difficult to pull those off. But mine is, I'll go back to an old reliable. It has to be service academies and underdogs. I've seen how people model these things. I don't even know how to necessarily model them either, as far as like your basic model when you're going up against a service academy team. Like, take, for example, success rate. Doesn't matter. Like 3 yards is fine for them. So underdogs, especially double-digit underdogs, I don't know, who knows how many more we'll get, but we'll get one against Notre Dame. They're 60-65%. It makes sense why, and it makes sense why the market hasn't adjusted, because there's there's only a couple a year, and how everyone is setting odds. I talked to lines makers, some of the most respected in the world. They still don't know how to set these, even the totals, because it just is such a unique style. And then we'll translate that into postseason, our favorite time of the year, bowl season. Service academies and bowls, they're always going to show up. A lot of it's about motivation. Still true to this day. I think it's 71% over the past 40 years. So service academy is always near and dear to my heart and my shoulder with Army Navy helmet. So yeah, of course I got to stay on brand and say that, Colin.
Mine is the semifinals of the playoff. The spread never matters. It never matters. And I mean, I'm looking at all the scores right now, and we're riding this pretty high until Georgia beat Ohio State by 1 point this last year. But before that, I mean, if you were a favorite, you always covered or you lost outright. The spread was never an underdog covering and losing the game. And I mean, I can go back to Alabama beating Washington 24-7. Spread was 16.5, right? It didn't matter. And, if I look at all these games, if you're a favorite, you either won outright or you lost outright. So there was no need to ever in a semifinal game take an underdog unless you were going to take the money line. And that, I mean, I'll keep writing that this year. Not sure how it's going to work with a 12-team playoff, but even with Ohio State showing up, I think that's a one-off, especially considering we all considered Ohio State good enough to be in the playoff against Georgia. But all the other years, complete blowouts in the semifinals.
I would also add, this is we'll have to talk about this year, but always fade Arkansas against Bobby Petrino. Anyway, we have more time to get to that in the future.
Brett, any gambling trends that you've been able to take advantage of?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I guess, more straight up than against the spread. and it will only work for this season, and then the 12-team playoff comes, and this will be useless. But Mike, it's kind of something you hit on the lack of upsets. So we've had 9 years of the playoff. At the point of the season where there are 4 weeks left in the regular season, of the teams that made the playoff at that point in the season, 4 weeks left in the season, 30 of the 36 teams were ranked in the top 6 at that time. In other words, nobody's going to come storming back from 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 for the most part. So 30 out of 36. With 4 weeks to go, your top 4 is out of those out of those top 6. You want to take it a couple of steps further. The week before the conference title game, so the regular season is complete. Every single team that has made the playoff ranked in the top 6 going into conference championship weekend. So if you think your number 7 team or 8 team has a chance, the reality is there's too many bodies to climb over and you're not going to make it. Of the 36 teams that have made the playoff, only 2 ranked number 6 going into conference title game weekend, and only 4 ranked at number 5. So that means the remaining 30 teams were already in the top 4, kind of what you were touching on, Mike. There aren't a lot of upsets, but I think it's kind of a combination. There haven't been a lot or any upsets in the SEC title game, as they're usually the top-ranked team. And 2, there's just too many bodies to climb over to climb up that far. Even in 2014, Ohio State, they were 5th, and TCU plummeted. So they were in position. People just didn't expect TCU to fall from 3 to 6. But again, if you're wanting to play on a potential national title team when you get into the month of November, I would recommend not taking anybody outside the top 6. Your odds are going to be great, but just send it to me. I'll book it for you, because they're not going to win the national title.
And that's a great transition into any potential futures. I don't have any now. I'll see if I can avoid going to Vegas this summer and not getting drunk and firing on futures, national title futures, I should say, because I just pulled out of my desk a pile of every year I go, and then I'll bet. Last year, Arizona State 200 to 1. Give me a break. Like, why? Hey, like there's 150 to 1 too. 200 to win 30 grand. You know what? It was 200 to win $0. To sit. It actually, at least it provided this little piece of content worth maybe 3 cents. So I have no futures yet. I know Colin has win totals. I'm just taking notes now, and I'll get in during the summer, and we'll have obviously all of our preview episodes. So Colin, I don't know if you have any win totals, futures, or something, just at least one. I know people can go check out all the stuff on the Action Network app and follow on there. But is there something that's still out there that you feel really passionate about, you want to bring up?
Well, I mean, I've taken LSU and Clemson futures so far. LSU was the first one out of the gate after the national title. I am so excited to see Harold Perkins. That defense around him is going to be as good as him. They're loaded at quarterback, no matter who they choose, where they go. It's, I think, the most talented team in the SEC West. And the news out of Bama is not making me feel like they're going to be able to hold up and give LSU any competition. So I'm happy with my LSU national title futures. As far as win totals, I think I got 7 or 8 in the app, Power 5. I am fully prepared for Group of 5 to hit the board at one of the books. And once it does, I'll load up the app with more of those, and I'll keep pushing out these nice PNG photo pictures of each team's summary and their win totals.
Yeah, those are great.
Yeah, I did it really for us so that when we podcast, it's like we got a great summary right here. It's now that the portal's closed for good, I'm ready to fire on as many win totals as possible and start making some conference future bets. Oh, and we'll save this for next pod. I did fire on Texas plus 150 to win the Big 12.
We'll talk about that next pod. Oh, by the way, this Arizona State was from 2 years ago, not last year. I want to clarify that. And then Iowa State. By the way, Iowa State to win it all. Now Purdy's like, he's a locked NFL starter. Where was this in the year I thought that they were going to potentially go to the college football playoff, Brock?
Because you thought every game was
I know, but now he comes in January and he's fine. Like, what? I mean, I was on to something before anybody. Unfortunately, it just cost me money. But anyway, is that going to do it for us, Mike?
Two more things, just quick. I like Penn State to win the Big Ten. I'm still waiting here in Pennsylvania for that number to hit. They're 25-1 to win the national title. So anywhere north of 5-1. I think this holistically could be Franklin's best roster. Aller is the missing piece. I know it's a gamble, but he has all the pedigree. He showed off the arm strength. He can do things and stretch the defense in ways that Clifford couldn't last year. And their offensive line has an opportunity to be special. They got top 10 pick at left tackle. They got 3 other seniors on the line. Really like their backfield. So I like Penn State. I also like the way the schedule shakes out. It's not clumped together in terms of their difficult games. If you want a flyer,
you've been hanging out with Ryan Ella lately a lot.
I have not. And if you know me, there's no love lost for me in the Nittany Lions. So for me to pull the trigger on them for the first time in my gambling career from a futures perspective, I'm really gritting my teeth putting that bet in. But if you want to talk about a flyer, how about Duke 40-1 to win the ACC? The arguably the biggest game in the history of Duke football and their opener against Clemson. They win that game. All of a sudden, things get really manageable from a hedge perspective. They arguably have the most consistent quarterback in the ACC right now. Jordan Travis has a much higher ceiling. Cade Klubnik, higher ceiling. But we saw Riley Leonard all season last year, and they pistol whipped UCF in the bowl game. So I don't know. I think that's mispriced. I think that's just on name brand alone. And then finally, one question from our audience. Our listener, JT Sparks, would like to know, if you took every college football playoff champion, 2014 to 2022, you put them in a little playoff, who's coming out number one? His guess is 2019 LSU. I'll kick it to Brett first. Who are you picking to come out on top of the heap of the playoff champions?
Real quick on my future play, whatever play you decide on.
Stetson Bennett graduated. Stetson graduated. So we need another Heisman long shot, Brett.
At least he won his conference title, unlike all your national title picks. Parlay it with Caleb Williams will not win the Heisman. You will add some more bang for your buck. Mike, it would have to be LSU, but my God, Georgia's team last year with Stetson Bennett, he should have won the Heisman. When he's sober, he's the best quarterback out there. That defense, that would be too bad. At some point, I guess we can get AI kind of match up those teams to see what would have happened. But that defense against Joe Burrow, get your popcorn. I know recency bias. I'd have to lean towards Georgia last year.
I'll take LSU because I don't care if Burrow's drunk or sober. He's winning that game. So I'm riding with Burrow. That 2019 team, people forget, like Georgia could have lost on a field goal. Like if Ohio State makes a field goal, that Georgia team goes down last year, right? From a very good kicker. And that LSU team, I remember trying to adjust my power ratings. And then I just said, I'm going to just bet them in the national title. I couldn't adjust them fast enough. And I faded this Georgia team in the semifinals successfully. So that's where that LSU team wasn't being touched. Like they were, and they were just blowing everyone's rating systems out of the water. And I'll take Burrow over Bennett any day of the week. A lot of respect to that Georgia D, but I'm going Joey B.
Two quick things here. One, that LSU defense gave up 38 to Texas, 37 to Ole Miss, and 41 to Bama that season. Their offense is untouchable. That offense.
What did CJ Stroud do to Georgia's D?
Well, how about the 2021 Georgia team? Because the entire 2021 Georgia defense, every starter got drafted in the NFL. So I would roll with that team if you're making an argument to potentially. I agree that LSU 19 should be the number one seed in this thing, which thank you, Brett, for bringing this up. Currently working on a book where I'm simulating the 68 best college football teams since 1980. That should, hopefully, if everything works out right, it'll come out before the college football season starts. But LSU 19 is a one seed for me, 95 Nebraska, 01 Miami, and 04 USC. Those are the 4 number ones. But yeah.
So you're agreeing you're agreeing it's the other one. You're agreeing that it would be them, right?
I agree that they deserve to be number one of the college football playoff champions. There's something about that 2021 Georgia team defensively and Stetson Bennett playing so well in crunch time his entire career. I think if they matched up, hypothetically, LSU's a 2.5, 3-point favorite on neutral field. So I think they're a slight favorite in that game.
Yeah, and odds An odds maker that I respect said that LSU 2019 would have been 2.5-point favorites over the Georgia team that just played. So I remember from my power ratings, it had been like 1.5. So obviously I would lean LSU, but I'm nervous because that is the same Dave Aranda defense that gave up 30 to Vandy, but Stuck is right. This Georgia team did give up 41 points to CJ Stroud. So I think it would go down to the wire, but I'd stick with the odds makers and say that LSU wins by 2.
All right.
The difference, by the way, the difference in that game, Calabrese, is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And the reason is because Georgia played so much quarters coverage. They would back everybody off about 12 yards back off the line of scrimmage. And the ability for Burrow to dump off there at the line of scrimmage, it would be completely just a game changer.
Yeah. Can we also look? A lot of respect for that Georgia day. LSU went undefeated. That 2021 Georgia team did not. They got blown out in a game, and they beat Clemson 10-3 on like a pick 6 early in the season. So I don't. Looking back now that we have time to digest, ton of respect for that 2021 D. I would love to see that D versus the LSU offense, but I just don't think that Georgia offense would have kept up ultimately.
Just to play devil's avocado one last time, that Georgia defense gave up single-digit points per game, and when you factor in their defensive scores, their net was like -3 per game. So I agree that they, as the season went on, they got better offensively. I'll also throw one more team in the ring. 2018 Clemson, I think for some reason is getting lost to history. They got Trevor Lawrence. The receiving core was probably the best that it's been since Mike Williams left Clemson. They had Etienne, and then they had the Power Rangers on the defensive line, and it's kind of what Colin was talking about this whole episode. They can drop 7 guys and get to the quarterback in that situation. So I also think schematically, personnel-wise, they were a good matchup. They'd still be an underdog, the 2019 LSU, but I think that'd be an interesting head-to-head as well.
Yep.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us. This has been the Big Bets on Campus podcast, brought to you by BetMGM. For Stuckey, Brett, and Colin, I'm Mike Calabrese. Thanks so much for listening. Next week, or I believe the week after that, we'll be back with a new BCS, another episode. We're going to get into all of our off-season content. That means conference previews, win totals, futures on the Heisman, national title, everything, as well as my little show, the Group of 5 Deep Dive with Mike Iannello. We'll be sure to give plenty of love to the Group of 5 because they're much maligned at this point. They're just getting rated. They're organ donors to the rich and giving up all their best teams to the Power 5. But there's going to be some interesting races in there this upcoming season, so we'll be sure to dig through everything to give you as much value as possible. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.